Welcome to our new edition of our DIW-OECD Industrial Strategies Dialogue with a very important and also perhaps a very delicate matter. We're looking into how to spend all the extra money that is going into defense in a way that it can also spur innovation, that it can spur some autonomy in Europe in terms of production capacities and, of course, not overwhelm public finances. And I'm very happy that we have Johannes Binder from the Kiel Institute, its Industrial Policy Lab, as our guest speaker today. He will introduce the subject, and after that, I will introduce a wonderful panel that basically covers all the aspects of the issue. Johannes, please.
So thank you very much for the invitation. These are some results and some insights from joint work with Moritz Schularik from the Kiel Institute and also joint work with Guntram Wolf at Bruegel, where we constructed a cool data set that I will present also in a few minutes. So to kick things off, I'll show you the German federal budget plans. We all know what's going to come in the next years. In blue, you see the major spending block that Germany still has, which is the subsidy of the pension system. But right after that, in orange, you will see the defense budget, and you already know this dramatic rise in spending that is going to come over the next year. So we're going to spend an additional 100 billion euros each year in Germany alone. So this is quite an impressive number, and of course it's important that we spend this money well, that we get the best results in terms of security, but also make some economic use of all the spending and kickstart our economy. As a comparison, you see as the right bar, this is science, research and development, and you see it's basically flatlining at a very low level. So this is not where a lot of impulses are going to come from. Defense is really what the big bang will be in the next years. A short glimpse at the literature. You all know, of course, the defense spending multipliers literature. There's an overview by Ilzetsky published last year. There's some papers on procurement and market design, also a great overview by Ricardo Carril from last year. Rodrigo Carril published earlier this year and presented at the Munich Security Conference. And of course, a big topic, defense spending in the long and growth in the long run, the role of R&D. There's, of course, this famous Moretti, Steinwender, Van Renen paper and Antolin Diaz-Zurico. I want to start with a look at the situation that we have in Europe at the moment. And one of the big features when we compare the US, which is spending a third more than Europe is doing on defense, but arguably way more powerful in the defense, in its army and in its defense capabilities. If you compare the US to Europe, these numbers are quite striking. If you look at how fragmented the defense markets are. So here we see the number of weapon systems for each category, how many we have in Europe and how many we have in the US. So there's one main battle tank system in the US, and we have 14 in Europe. We have 2 types of howitzers in the US and 23 in Europe. So if you look at these numbers, at these ratios, you see it's way more fragmented. We have way more different products of the same class that are in the same market, and this, of course, leads to a lack of scale. So one of the big issues when we spend all this money is that we have fragmentation and no scaling. At the same time, we see a lot of concentration. So we see both. We see a lack of scale and we see a lack of competition. So this is by Guntram Wolf, Ethan Kapstein, and others. They looked at the share of the largest defense contractors in each country, and we see that in Poland, UK, Germany, so the prominent spenders in the in Europe, they have a lot of concentration in their defense markets. The US is faring way better. And this, of course, trickles down into competition, and we'll see a lack of competition, higher prices, and less innovation in Germany. This is, of course, another aspect I want to mention today is that we are failing to ramp up the production capabilities. So here we see the production of artillery shells, a very uniform product that we need for defense urgently. It's a standard ammunition for these howitzers. We see the production in Russia. Of course, it went up quite fast. And in Europe, it's basically flatlining. So we see some projections that it's expected to go up as we speak in recent times and also in the next years, but this is moving very slowly. So a big question is how we can transform all this money that we spend into actual production and production capabilities. We are just lacking the skills to do that so far. I want to give a short glimpse into one way how we can tackle the whole thing on the side of procurement contracts. So if you think about the production of these military goods, it's very hard to ex ante know how much of these military goods we will actually need. There might be peace times, then there's the risk of overproduction, and of course there's the risk of higher escalation with Russia. And there might be underproduction if we just stick to this quantity of production as the target in our procurement contracts. Overproduction is expensive, of course, if we spend more money than we should have exposed, but underproduction can be deadly. So if we produce not enough and there's some escalation, this can be very hurtful for the whole economy, for the whole country. However, producers are reluctant to invest in fixed capital. We see this in the data, we hear this, we see this in the news, we hear this when we talk to people in the industry and in the defense ministry. One reason is because these producers do not incorporate their externality. So there's a deterrent value in building up capacity. The opponent will really struggle to make a decision and decide to attack a country if this country is able to produce a lot of defense goods in a short time. So this is something that the producers do not incorporate. They also will not be able to reap all the benefits if there's a price spike, because you can think about a controlling of the economy in a war board-like situation, so the government might interact if the demand is too high. One way out of this is capacity contracts. So capacity contracts is the idea that the government is paying companies to build up production capacity rather than only the outputs. So this would be the construction of new production lines and so on, the stockpiling of inputs, so that in the case of a adverse event, we can scale up easily. We would need to pay money for that, of course. Companies will not do this by their own, but this would then incentivize fixed capital investment. It will create a deterrence and it will reduce unit costs. So this could be a very effective tool if we do this right. I will now jump to the second part, looking more at the long run. As we know, an important aspect for making this military money spent productive for growth is spending in R&D. Here we see the spending shares of the military budget in different countries on the left, and we see the US with more than 10% is in a way other dimension than Germany with about 2%. So if you keep that in mind, even if we keep this ratio, this 2%, this could be a massive boost for the research and development landscape just by the sheer scaling up of the military amounts, the military budget we are going to spend in the next years. So we're going to spend an additional 100 billion euros in the next years, each year. And if you multiply this by 2%, you already get quite a big bang. So let's say we double this from 2 to 4%, be not a massive jump, still be relatively low compared to the US, for example, then we could get 4 billion euros for R&D each year. So this is roughly about the budget of the MIT. So let's imagine we can just, by doing a little bit here in the share and just spending more, we can have an additional MIT for defense in Germany without cutting much in other aspects. That would be quite impressive, in my opinion. We know this is really key for the long-run effects. So this is from Antolin Diaz and Zurico. They show that military spending can have a total factor productivity effect that persists. So it's not just a boost that then turns to a bust or goes back to zero. This can really have long-lasting effects, and the key for that is actually more spending on R&D. And there's other research by Steinwender and co, that the co-authors that show that military R&D can also crowd in private R&D. So if you want to get more innovative, if you want to have higher total factor productivity and growth in the long run, we really need to twist that screw and put more money into R&D. It will just be the best way to go forward here. I'll show you some other results now with the joint work with Guntram Wolf based on the Kiel military procurement tracker. So this is quite a cool data set. We track military procurement contracts by major European governments. We look at media information, departments of defense information, and so on. And we covered time period from 2020 to January 2026. So this is really procurement by procurement contract, a long list of procurement contracts that is now publicly available, and you can use it for all kinds of analysis. The countries we're covering are Germany, the UK, and Poland. We had France in for some time, but the data quality is not the best. So we stick to those three major defense spending countries in Europe. And we collect information such as the contraction date, the nominal value of the contract, the suppliers, the companies that are involved, the expected delivery, and some more information on the type of product that is being procured. And this is really a great data set if you want to analyze how European rearmament is moving, how the defense industrial capacity is evolving in Europe, and all kinds of other analysis, because we just have this vast amount of information on each contract here. And we use this information to look at how these three major European countries actually procure. So procurement, we know, besides R&D, is a really good lever to shift the economy in the way you want it to go. So what we did is that we looked at what kind of technologies are these procurement contracts based on. And we found out that if you look at these new disruptive technologies that we actually see also in Ukraine to be successful and efficient, so mid-range strike capabilities, AI, automation, drones, land drones, sea drones, all of these new types of technology that you hear about in the news, what share of money is spent on these? And what we can see here, and was quite shocking to us, is that while Poland is doing a lot of progress there, going up from 3% of procurement to 16%, Germany is actually reducing its share of new and disruptive technologies in procurement. These technologies are important for security, as we see from Ukraine, as we see from the news, and also when we speak to experts in defense technology, they confirm that these are the technologies of the future, but they are likely also the technologies you want to have developed well in your own country for civil use. So these are the typical dual use goods. So automation, drones, these are the same technologies that navigate through the woods of Ukraine to find their targets. You could use similar technologies to develop autonomous trucks, for example. So there's a lot of dual use, a lot of spillovers to the civilian side of the economy. And this to us shows us that this is not a real trade-off, that you either go defense or technology. You have to do the same. And ultimately, this will lead to security and growth if you can combine those two. So there's not a trade-off between the two. You can actually make use of both. Let me wrap up with some comments that we can then go to discussion. As we saw, it's a big thing is to get the European defense market going. We are lacking competition and we are lacking scale. So we just need to get away from these national champions, the concentration and national procurement of domestic suppliers, and go forward to a situation where we can make use of the scaling of the big European market and at the same time foster competition. Because at the moment, we just have these national champions in these small arenas, but on the international scale, it's just too small. The second point, we need to get the incentives right. So the procurement contracts we now write, they are not designed for these new types of technologies, of these short innovation cycles, and they're not designed to ramp up the production capabilities, the production capacities. They're designed to procure a fixed number of items There's some Vorhalteverträge, some types of contracts that might be a little bit different, but in principle, we're still lacking the type of contracts that actually gives incentives to the companies to be innovative, to be fast, to reduce costs, and to build up scale and production capacities. So there's something urgently to do. Likely might involve a change of the law, how we set prices and how we do procurement, but this is urgently an urgent priority to get this going. The third point I want to stress is we need to increase the share of R&D in defense spending from these around 2%. We need to go way up. The UK Defense Review set a goalpost of 10%. Maybe this could be a target also for Germany. The same is true for startups. So we're currently buying a lot from these big companies that are entrenched, that produce the same as they did many years ago. They have good connections to the government and make good contracts. An increase in the share of contracts going to startups could break this pattern that we had for so long. We could then procure new technologies. We could then foster competition with the incumbents, which would also lead to more innovation and a reduction of prices. And finally, as we saw in the procurement database, there is no trade-off between defense and growth if we procure these technologies of the future. So this is really also an urgent call to the Ministry of Defense, I guess, most importantly, to really look at these new technologies that emerge in Ukraine, make use of the new technologies, because these will be the drivers of growth also for the civilian side in Germany. And I'm coming to an end, doing some promotion now. If you're interested in the full paper, Time to Spend Smart, on how to do this right, together with Moritz Schularik, the database of the procurement tracker, and of course the Industrial Policy Lab, where we discuss at the Kiel Institute questions of how industrial policy should be shaped for goals like defense, national security, but also growth and innovation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Johannes, and please have a seat. As you saw, it's a very rich and broad and wide issue, the defense spending that's going up, and so is my panel, so I can cover all these aspects. So maybe I'm going backwards in the alphabet for once, and welcome first Christian Ziach, who is here for the High-Tech Gründerfonds, so basically, startup fund, I don't know how you say it in English, so basically promoting, finding financing for startups and scale-ups in Germany. So Christian, welcome, and please have a seat wherever you feel comfortable. So that's one aspect. We also are very lucky to have Eva Vogt, who's here from Sprint, which is basically the German agency that is meant to promote innovations that are disruptive, let's say. And welcome, Eva, and thank you very much for joining us today. Charlotte Senftleben-König is here for the Industrial Policy Department of the Ministry of Economics. Charlotte, welcome. And of course, we always have somebody who comes from Paris, from the OECD. My dear colleague Tomasz Koszluk is here. He has analyzed with his teams the fiscal implications, but also innovation growth implications of defense spending, very importantly, across OECD countries, including the UK and Poland. So great to have you here. And we have another Tommaso Duso, who is our competition expert as always, and dear friend and co-organizer from DIW and head of the Monopolies Commission. Please, Tommaso. Now I'm in the middle. So maybe I want to start with you, Christian, because we heard that, so we saw how basically the spending on innovative, the spending share on innovative technologies was going down somehow. But when I saw this graph, I was thinking, yes, but probably the overall spending is going up a lot. So how do you experience that? Do you feel these poles somehow? Or how do you see public and also private financing for new technologies that are, I'm sure you don't do defense proper, but you will use, how is the picture shaping up there in that area?
First of all, thanks for having me, and you're spot on. I came to the very same conclusion. I think while the percentage is going down, the Ministry of Defense representatives would probably argue in an opposite direction. They would say, okay, the absolute numbers are going up. Yeah? So this is something we should consider here. But all in all, if we think of the way we spend taxpayers' money here, yeah, and it's all about deterrence and defending our interests, and not only our borders, it raises many concerns, because it's not only about the capabilities which we will procure, which we learned from the war in Ukraine are maybe inferior to what Ukraine has deployed over the last years. But also they will come delayed. So all the shipyards, all the companies are busy. That is good for them in order to keep their production lines busy. Yeah? And of course, they always need higher increments in terms of contractual volume to increase their production capacities. Yeah? But that leaves us with a situation that we are maybe not well prepared for anything what comes between now and 2029 or 2030. Yeah, and very quick solution could be something what Johannes has pointed in his presentation here, would be to go to smaller systems which can be manufactured and produced in vast quantities, and from which we have learned they are effective. Yeah? Because at the end of the day, it's not like, okay, we live in a parallel world. Yeah? It's about what is really effective on the battlefield. Yeah? And Ukraine is showing us on a daily basis what is effective. Yeah? So they have not received everything what they have asked us for. Yeah? So they were required to innovate. And that is exactly what we need. It's not just about production capacities, it's also about being innovative, because we all know the adversary will adapt to a new situation. They will come up with new answers, with new challenges for us. And if we think of a bigger picture here, what we need to have in place is a very innovative ecosystem, yeah, which is capable to come up with answers for questions from the battlefield, not in years, but in months and weeks. And this is exactly what we need. And if we think of the life cycles we see also in the civilian economy, it's the same. Yeah, we see we are constantly being challenged from China, and we need to also increase the pace of our civilian economy, so we can profit from each other. Yeah, if we think of both sides of the coin here. And if we think of the total amount of spending on dual use or defense, well, at the end of the day, we are venture capital investors, like many others out there. So what we can do is we can help, the startups in the beginning. We can provide them some runway, typically 18 months. Yeah, but if we are honest with each other, if we think of the typical procurement cycles, 18 months are not enough. And if we think of the typical investment and disinvestment periods of typical VCs, 6-7 years of investing and then trying to sell some of their financed companies, yeah, this is not perfectly matched with what the military does here. So we have, so we can be happy, first of all, that there were enough VCs out there who were willing to finance this very complex investment vertical, but in the same time, this is a different game, and we cannot leave it just, to the privately led venture capital scene to assure that all the companies which we need from the defense perspective will be funded.
Charlotte, you wanted to add something? I saw you. Yeah.
Thank you. Is that on?
I think so. They're all
okay.
on.
No,
yeah.
I just wanted to ask a question, because I understand what you're saying, that the cycles do not match. But still, when we look at the numbers, we see that money is pouring into that sector. So what is your experience? Are they all stupid, or, I mean, where does it come from?
Yeah, I have to come up, as always, with an honest answer. And the honest answer, well, there's a big growing opportunity. Yeah, and all the investors, you know, I wouldn't say they're greedy, but they see the big opportunity. They see what's going on in the US. They see their IPOs in the making. So for that, of these very reasons, I can understand that certain companies attract, you know, a lot of money. But this should not distract us here from the discussion which we need to have here. We see not only a concentration with the primes, we see also a concentration with the neo-primes. And what does it mean? We also need to think, if we think of industrial resilience, of industrial bases. We need to have a broad industrial basis. We need to have also future Mittelstand companies in place. They also need to receive some sort of funding for what they are doing. They are quite often building components, subsystems, etc. But these are the companies which are typically ignored by venture capital investors. And why is that? Because the potential outcome won't result in an IPO. It result maybe in a SME. So these are the shortcomings when it comes to venture capital finance here.
So basically you have to think about a broad industrial base in some ways, right? Yeah, Thomas, maybe you can come in here because it would be interesting to hear how this shapes out in different OECD countries. Many countries are raising their defense spending. We just heard you have to think about how do you manage your procurement? How do you think about a broader industrial base? How do you think about startups, not just financing a few of them? Is that, you know, how do countries think about it? And then because if you increase your spending in such a short time, right, it's easy to go wrong in many ways. So maybe you can say a few words about this.
I think very much so. First of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. I think there's a couple of aspects on that. I take a bit of a more general approach first to your answer, but and one thing we see, and we documented that quite well in our work, is the ramp up, the synchronization in a way of the ramp up in defense spending is basically unprecedented since the end of the Cold War, right? So it's about 80% of OECD countries are increasing military spending.
Including Japan and
Japan, I think some Latin American countries, but it's we haven't seen anything like that at the same time. That can lead to bottlenecks on the supply side, obviously, because there's limited ability to ramp up the capacity to produce things, right? So this may result also in more expensive, at least initially, more expensive production, and because there's a race for a limited amount of producers. But I think in the more general aspect, I think I'd like to refer to a couple of points that were raised by Johannes, which I found were very, very interesting and very, very good points. On the European question, I mean, I couldn't agree more about the kind of need for European scaling in the European market, and you know, looking also into startups and allowing for competition in the European market. That would be, I think, the essential thing around. I mean, it's very difficult to get away from the notion of national champions and protecting, you know, this kind of relatively captured market, but it will be, I think, a fundamental factor of success, right, going forward. On the R&D also, which I think is the countries go very different on that too, and Germany actually relative to its military spending, I think the chart you showed has a relatively high share of R&D compared to other European countries, but compared to the US in terms of nominal numbers, this is 20-30 times less per year, right? 20-30 for many years already. So even the ramp up, which I mean, if there's a ramp up, this will not make up for the backlog on this. So the amount of military spending going into innovation in Germany is still going to be very low compared to what you have in the US. So I mean, let's not be delusionary about that in a way. The benefits of the R&D spending, well, they depend a lot on the spillovers to the rest of the economy. So dual technologies, things that you mentioned, right? I mean, there the evidence from the AER paper, the very positive evidence, that's actually for the US, where there's a whole ecosystem of companies, of agencies, of universities that, you know, are geared to make this happen, right? We don't have that at the same scale in Europe. Yeah? So building that will actually be essential for reaping the benefits of even the smaller innovation spending. Yeah. Where I was a bit more hesitant is the growth effects. Yeah. Because I'm a bit hesitant on using the growth effect as a selling point for this. I mean, we do this not because of growth. We do this because there's a strong need to ramp up our security consideration, right? And many of these things, like building, I mean, drones are a great example, I think. We don't need drones. We need the capacity to build drones, right? And that, I mean, there will be a short-term GDP effect from setting up the factories or investing in that. But idle capacity or capacity that is not fully utilized does not contribute to growth per se, right? So there's a little bit of caution. So growth may not be the right kind of thing to look at when we're I mean, innovation, yes, for the longer-term effects, but just a little bit of caution there. So I think, the way we approach this, the amount of money we spend on innovation, that is very important, but how we spend, especially at the European level, I think is going to be crucial.
Yeah, thank you very much. What I should say, so we're going into very complex issues here, of course, the security, innovation nexus. And I should say to our public that's online that you can ask questions at any time. And we will, the on-site audience will be brought in a little bit later. I will tell you when. First, we have to warm up here on the panel. So maybe that's the time for you, Tommaso, to jump in. Because I would be just take a step back, as Thomas said. Building production capacities is not the same, of course, as spurring innovation. You probably need both, but it's also a little bit, a captured market, or at least there are big traditional companies. So it's not easy to do this, all of this in a very short time. At the same time, countries have decided they need to go very fast. So how do you do that? SME base to basically be a supplier, spurring innovation, doing the right kind of procurement, ideally European-wide competitions, etc. It's desirable to copy the United States, I'm sure, but doing this in a very short time, how do you go about it? How do you think about it at the Monopolies Combination?
Yeah, thank you, Nicola. Thank you. It's great to be on this panel, and it was a fantastic presentation. I was saying before we started, so 1.5 years ago, when we saw that Germany made this decision, whatever it takes, not just as Sondervermögen, so in defense, it's even more. The first reaction of my colleague Rupert Potsum, the lawyer in the Monopolies Commission, and mine was, oh, that's great, but it can be really problematic because the world in which we do this, we pump a huge amount of money, is not the world where we think competition innovation works. On the opposite. And 1.5 years later, these guys come and show the numbers and show that not only the situation is critical, but it's getting worse. So these numbers for Germany, I mean, it's true that the volume increased, but the percentage share of innovative spending is decreasing in Germany. I think is horrible. Because we should think in counterfactual, right? So so what happens now is that that the money is spent first in traditional warfare, which is not the world in which we live now. And we saw in Ukraine, it was rightly mentioned. So war has become something different, and it seems that we don't understand it. So. I had some points, but I will not go over these points because I want to. So I think the main argument I want to push, and Johannes already did it, is we need competition, and we need a completely new way of thinking on how we do policy. And of course, we are in the worst of all possible sectors to do that, because defense has been always a very traditional sectors and so on, where political connections are strong, where we are, again, in the worst of all world. So we need scale, but we have enormous concentration because we are not in Europe. We are in a world of 27 dwarfs, and every dwarf wants his or her or its on a national champion, right? So I think that I think it's a bit unfortunate that we have this panel, because I think we will all agree. So we should have somebody who doesn't agree with that. And then for me, it's important. So who is not agreeing with the fact that we need more concentration, that we need more Europe, that we need new procurement, that we need more innovation? So, and one answer could be some part of the bureaucracy. So not the ministry that is sitting here, maybe. And of course, there are very strong interests. So, and there, we also see problematic tendencies. Again, so we will publish our biannual report next week, where we have a subchapter on competition policy in defense, and we look which kind of mergers and cooperation has been cleared by the Bundeskartellamt, by the European Commission, and you know, there is a lot going on, but it's also there is a lot to be concerned. So we have key players like Rheinmetall that are expanding, they are creating an ecosystem which can be good, but taking all parts of the value chains into its control. And that is something that, especially in this situation where we have anyway lack of competition, that is extremely problematic, and reminds me very much what happened in tech with few players who understood that, you know, it's really valuable to create this conglomerate, this ecosystem. So there is where we have to be very careful in the next years on the competition side to make sure that the markets stay contestable. And that can be done through policy, through demand. So defense is a very peculiar market. There is one buyer, and the buyer is the state. And the buyer does not as much buyer power as we think, because at the end, so they have to pay what they want, especially if speed is everything what counts. But through procurement, the buyer can do a lot of things. So I think that the two key elements, and then I end to think where we should go on the policy side are three. One is make procurement more open to innovation, more open to creating interoperability, creating chances for SME and startups. The second one is to do it at an European level, and I know that maybe it's wishful thinking to think that the European Commission will do it, but then there might be other mechanisms, and Guntram and colleagues have mentioned this European defense mechanism as a coalition of the willings, and that could be a point to start, excluding maybe Germany and France, that are the two problems, and having the one who wants to do that. And the third one that is more my turf is to say, sure, consolidation and scale is very important, but that can only come when we have solved this problem at the demand side, because to have consolidation, as long as we have small markets, is even worse. So antitrust authorities should be very careful to control this consolidation wave, this cooperation wave, and allow it only if we see that on the demand side we have a larger market that can sustain then competition.
Yeah, thank you, Tommaso. Many important. You want to, Charlotte? Charlotte is my one person who jumps in, and I don't even have to ask questions. That's very good.
As part of the bureaucracy that is sitting here, I might say one or the other word. So I was indeed quite impressed by the graph you showed on fragmentation in Europe as compared to the US. That's indeed very interesting, and I think there is definitely a need for sending a signal for strengthening the internal market. there is a need, but I would like to point at the fact that something is happening, really. Yeah, I mean, just 6 years ago, we didn't even have a Directorate General that in the European Union that dealt with defense. Yeah, now we have that. We've got programs and programs. The SAFE instrument, that's a finance instrument, EDIP, and so on. Yeah, these are programs that are designed to strengthen common procurement, and I think these things, should these things have happened 10 years ago? Yes, definitely, but something is happening right now, and this shouldn't be overlooked, I think.
Well, I wanted to ask Eva something, but Christian was grabbing his mic, so I let you jump in, and then, yeah.
Yeah, I took the opportunity here. So I asked myself, okay, why do we face this fragmented situation here in Europe? Yeah, and why are we so slow in adopting new technologies? Yeah. And what I did, I looked a little bit back into history, military history, yeah, and yeah, that gave me some relief because this is not an exclusive situation of our generation. Yeah, this is a situation which was also faced, you know, by the people who were in charge during World War I, during World War II, when things emerged like the submarine. The submarine was something on board. Yeah, the British, they hated it in the beginning. It was not English. And the US were struggling with the appearance of an aircraft carrier. Yeah? So there were, you know, cultural fights between the US Navy. Should we stick to the old school battleship or should we adopt this thing called aircraft carrier? And can this thing really sink another battleship? Yeah, question mark. Yeah. So our situation is not exclusive, but the huge difference which we face now is innovation was never as fast as today, and it will never be as slow as of today. So we see, you know, an influx of AI-driven capabilities, yeah, and we don't have that much time, like in the industrial age, to get acquainted with new technologies. That is only the thing I would like to make clear here.
Well, excellent, because that also leads me directly to Eva, because I think what you just mentioned, Christian, these short innovation cycles, that's not specific to defense, right? So that's to all of deep tech in many ways. Also, when we heard about fragmentation in Europe, right? This is what we always talk about when we talk about the lack of disruptive innovation in Germany, but also in Europe. We are not using the entire market, etc., etc. So if I just wanted to ask you, how does this resonate with your overall thinking about disruptive innovation, and perhaps if you can say, do things change for you as an agency, also with more money being poured into defense, with perhaps not enough R&D, but you know, procurement could be redesigned to become more innovative? What's your perspective on this issue?
Yeah, so thank you as well from my side. The Sprint is the Agency for Breakthrough Innovation, and we were built with the idea of DARPA, because breakthrough innovation is also a big part of DARPA. For example, the internet was a dual use case which transformed a whole society and a whole generation, I would say. And we are also at Sprint looking at technology readiness levels between 3 and 7 out of 9. So everything before the prototype, way before the prototype. And we see that also a lot of startups come with potential use cases, because we are quite early in our funding, because we want to bridge the gap, the valley of death, where the startups can't get any funding from the private market. And that's why we are stepping in. So we are not procurers ourselves for the technologies. And what we see, there are a lot of startups that are coming with also dual use ideas. And I think, because you mentioned growth, it's not the main aspect in the defense discussion, because then you have to consider opportunity costs, right? And grow, then it wouldn't be a great investment. So what we are looking into in the startups Of course, defense is important, but we are also looking at business cases, and it's really hard for small startups to build a business case around it because of, we are looking also at the B2B value chain. It's really important. There are a lot of startups on the market that are trying to sell directly to the government, but they don't come in because of the procurement laws. I think over 90% of the contracts are given directly to the contractors, so they don't have the chance. They can't get in. They don't have the entry. So that's where competition comes in. But they shouldn't just ask the 3 big firms to pitch, but should also consider the new ones. And the aspect of the R&D is important, but what a lot of people forget is we have that huge amount of money, and they have to spend fast because of the money principle that they have to spend a money amount in 1 year. So they have to spend it, and there is a huge backlog they have to fill with procuring stuff like helmets and stuff like that. So, and after that, they try probably also to implement R&D and innovation, but R&D takes time. You can't buy innovation just like that. So you can set incentives, but you also have to have a culture in politics, also in the procurement side, and on the defense side, but also on the side of the taxpayers, that R&D always has the risk that there is no innovative outcome, at least, right? Or no outcome at all, because the idea that is tried to develop, it's not working, maybe. So, but I think also the Ministry of Defense and their procurement part is a great field for innovation, because they have the test areas. They can do so many new and innovative also forms of procurement, because they can test and trial. And that's why they should try to move in the direction of innovation more, but also they have to change the law. Not I'm in the stakeholder group in the European Union for the procurement law, and it's not the European level, the legal level on the European side for defense, but also on the national level we could do more. I'm in the dialogue with the procurement part there of the defense ministry, and we are trying to look at the Preisrecht. I'm not sure if it's familiar, but it says that if it's not on the market, so usually a new idea is not on the market yet, then then you have to calculate the price in a very difficult form, I would say, and then there is just a little profit margin of 5% that can come on top. So you can just you have to calculate, and you can just have your actual costs in the bill plus a minimum of around 5% usually profit margin, and for a startup it's unbelievably low, because this low profit margin eats basically your personal investment in getting the contract, right? You can't leave these resources out of it, but you can't bill them. So I think we are right now in the dialogue to try to innovate this Preisrecht. So it's easier also for innovative startups to have an entry into that.
So basically, if I come back, Eva, to what you said at the beginning, we're modeled after DARPA, which is the innovation agency in the US, right? Which works a lot, I think, with procurement, basically competitions also, and spurring innovation through procurement. But what you're saying is you don't even have the legal basis at the moment to do this. Also, Germany doesn't have it. But one question I have is, you would also want to use the size of the European market, right? Perhaps have European-wide competitions. That doesn't happen either at the moment, right? Or do you have...
I mean, it's partly understandable because every state, especially Germany, when you have a huge amount of credit, they are interested. They have some domestic interests, right?
Sure.
So that's one part, and we want to be resilient, but we also have countries in the EU that don't have this European spirit as much as we do, at least. We could.
I have to.
I mean, in the procurement sense, right? I think everyone has to join.
Absolutely. So, but so I think that is one of the main problem in Germany. I think that Germany is one of the main problem here because Germany is the one that is blocking the more European approach, which, I mean, one can understand. So this is a lot of money, money of the German taxpayer. So, but again, so I think, I don't know. 2 years ago, Draghi came with his report, and I was very critical on some parts of the report, but I mean, one point is central, and I think that it should have arrived to everybody. So either we understand that in this new world, we have to act differently than in the past 50 years, but quickly differently. I mean, it's true that things are changing, but at the pace of the last century. So, so I think Germany should take the lead, and they don't take the lead. And again, so my friends and colleagues say I'm more German than the Germans. Still, I'm Italian, and I can dare to say that. So I think that is one of the main problems, especially in defense. Germany is the largest spender and is spending, according to the NICE data, only on German company. I remember a few months ago on LinkedIn, one of your colleagues was explaining one of these fantastic competitions that you have and so on. And then he talked about who came with idea and said, it's great, and we have people from Sweden, from the Netherlands. And then one guy commented, but it's horrible. This is German money, should be spent for German firms, right? So, and that is, I think, a very fundamental cultural problem that is very difficult to address, and it's culture in the firms, it's culture in the ministries, it's culture maybe even among us, among the population, that we don't understand that it's the time to do a radical step towards something that is new, and if we don't do it, I think we are doomed.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think both sides are in some way understandable. And I think if we have a lot of advantages if we have it on a European level, if we spend on a European level or join forces, join procurement. But I also understand the other side. I think it's a debate that only can move forward if on a European level there can be some alignment or agreement on it. Otherwise, like we at Sprint, we have one viewpoint you just mentioned, but I also understand the other side. And I think in the past, I'm not sure if FCAS, like there are not so many successful role models from the past where joint procurement in the defense sector actually worked. But it wasn't because of the legal framework, it was more like because of the people. And I think that's the main movement there has to be, that the people are discussing about it and come to some sort of alignment. And I also value every other opinion, I think. But if we want to move forward and join forces, basically, and join the money to have a much bigger impact also on innovation, that is also an angle to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Johannes, and I actually want to link a question to it after all, because all of these, I mean, I totally understand the economic argument to say we should do it at a European level, right? We should have innovations, we need to competition at the European wide level, but there's also the little problem that it's not one state, right? And states wage war. There's not even common defense policy. So my question to you would be, how do you envision this European-wide approach while it's still, union, but not United States of Europe?
So this aligns perfectly with what I wanted to say anyways. Since you mentioned FCAS, one way how we could do this is really to go into this brand new next generation technologies. Mm-hmm. So in FCAS we had 5 generations of fighter jets before, and we had these companies that have been intertwined with the French and German government in to different degrees for a long time. I don't want to get too much into the detail, and of course I don't want to put the blame on one side or the other. But if we go to completely new technologies or emerging technologies, we can not only, somebody mentioned this, that we are lagging behind in, I think you mentioned this, and in innovation over the past decades. So we can not only leapfrog on the technology, but also on the political entrenchment of these interests. So maybe this would, Tommaso earlier mentioned that we are living in the worst possible dimension, doing this in defense and doing this urgently now. Maybe this is the best way out. So we go to new technologies because they are better than the old technologies, as we see in Ukraine. Because they get more innovation done, more innovation into our economies, and we do not have yet this strong entrenchment of interest that if we join forces and say we want to have a joint European Starlink, as we see super important in Ukraine at the moment. If we say we want to have joint European space capabilities, that would be super important. And we do not yet know whether this will be a German project or a French project or Italian project. This would be ways out because we do not have this strong interest existing already. If we say we want to build an airplane together, of course the French are there. Mm-hmm. If we say we want to have a cool new tank, the Germans would be the first, or the Italians maybe too. But we would already have our lists of potential winners, and then all the politicians would start calculating how much can I get from this. Mm-hmm. If you pool the resources for completely new stuff, mm-hmm. it's not made out ex ante who's going to win which share, and this might be a way out to have more these competitions, trial and error, a lot of European startups trying to find the best solutions rather than politicians trying to carve up the cake in a national way. That would be my answer. And
just one word. And the spring experience is exactly what we need. It's not just new things, but also new tools to do that. So spring was created with a new law. And that is what we could do, create a new way to procure new things, and that is where we start.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Tomasz.
I'm not sure it's a point or it's a question, actually, but maybe we'll figure that out jointly. I mean, on the new technologies, actually, that you mentioned, I think that's a very interesting thing to raise. I mean, I guess it's a question, yeah. But I mean, first of all, Europe is also quite behind on some of these new technologies, right? That is a fact. But are these technologies, at least that would be my presumption, they have more potential for dual use than some of the, I mean, a tank doesn't have a lot of, dual use. I mean, parts of it maybe, yeah. But is there more potential for dual use from these technologies in general? And that may be actually the hook there also.
So from my side, it would be a strong yes. And of course, I'm not a military expert, so maybe you should have invited a military technology expert. But what we see is AI. We see the capability in space, automation. If you look at these small robots running on the ground, running around, basically, integration of so the digital battlefield, like all these innovations. This is not the heavy metal that we used to have, the tanks, the howitzers, and so on, and the big frigates. Germany, for some reason, is still very much obsessed with buying big ships. These are. So I would have a guess which would be the better dual-use technologies in the future. And of course, the US is ahead, but I think this should not imply that we should just stick to an even older technology. So it will be tough. It will take some time, some money, maybe some failed investments. That would be fine for me. But this, for me, is the way to go. And maybe this, I can also mention that. You said taxpayers might not be happy if we invest a lot of money in R&D or speculative technologies, let's call it that, with uncertain results, if the taxpayers' money is lost at the end. I mean, that's what's happening in defense every day. We spend 100 billion more soon, and we have these failed projects, delayed projects that are more expensive. FCAS is one example. The frigate F-126 was just cancelled. I mean, we're burning money. We're burning a lot of money already. So putting a small part of that and hope that maybe 1 out of 10 bets works out would, at least for me, be a better way to deal this. And I understand it's not your position, but just wanted to.
Yeah, I think there also have to be a little bit of differentiation when we say so we want to procure, they want to procure something, and in the end it doesn't work out because it doesn't work because there's some, I don't know, material that in the tank or something like that. We have some weapons that don't work really well. So that was not intended. But with innovation, you know it in the beginning. That's, I think, the difference for a procurer, because then there has to be a cultural mind shift, basically, that they are willing to take the risk and to accept in the beginning of the procurement it won't work. And the percentage that it won't work, real R&D, is really high. We see it at Sprint, we see it in a normal fund, like in an early stage fund, in a deep tech fund. Deep tech phases are usually also not very fast. So the mindset, we have to procure fast, we have to have innovation fast. You can't have a time watch or like a stopwatch on innovation and R&D, right? So that's a cultural shift. They have to accept it, and it has to be clear that sometimes, or even often, innovation doesn't work out when you have deep tech R&D projects. And I think it's a great business model is every venture capital fund. They seed projects, they bet on one unicorn, and then every investor is fine. So, so that's the mindset I think they could a little bit, adopt at the procurement team in the defense sector, because, they not just entering, and it's also like if you are open to innovation and have this mind shift, you're also more open for the market, because then you're sourcing, you try to find talents, you try to find new R&D startups to get them to innovate, and they also have then an more open mindset and don't stick necessarily on the technology they know for the last 10 years. So I think it's also more fun for them.
Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert on that, but when I hear your very interesting discussion, what you're turning a bit a blind eye is on the role of universities. I mean, we are pouring lots of money into the so-called Grundlagenforschung, going into the risk of spending lots of money with no output, and that's a perfectly valid system. And there, my feeling is we're still hampering ourselves by the civilian clauses, where lots of universities say no military research.
Yeah, that's true. We also have a project inside of Sprint where we try to get these innovative teams out from university to start a company, start a startup, and try to have a business model, because they are so much into research. Usually they lack the business component. So we try to also close this gap. And yeah, that's especially true. We have to look into the translation from university knowledge into the market. It's defense market, but also every other market.
Go. We want it to be lively.
This is also a very important point. So it's also something that you can read in our annual report in the chapter on AI and industrial. So the transfer is something that is missing very much in Germany. So we have very good basic research, and the transfer, and then is where we are lacking. And I mean, that would be also an opportunity, a dual-use opportunity, to say we invest money not only in the basic research, but much more in the transfer. And so everybody here who is working at a university or a public institution knows that at the moment money is very, very scarce there. So I think that that could be also an incentive. So if you allocate some money for research at the university and to do transfer on these areas that are of dual use, it would be also an opportunity. And I mean, we are talking about billions. If you only take a tiny share of this money, it's the point you had. So go 1% of this 100 billion per year. I mean, it's a huge amount of money for the university system and Fraunhofer, you name it. So I think that would be also a huge opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So this is great. We really got heated up because I have two panelists who have the mic in their hand. I did want to say that I think it's time, because we heated up, also to take questions from the audience. Perhaps I should say, because I heard nothing from my online audience, you can type questions into the commentary function of YouTube, and then it will reach me. I don't know who is first, but I go with you, Christian, and then Tomek.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, everything was almost said. So we have a tech, we have a talent. Yeah. The question is how to turn, ideas into successful companies. And where I would like to place a little grain of salt here is it should not result in innovation theater, right? Because at the end of the day, investors and also companies, they need to have contracts, real contracts at a certain point in place. Mm-hmm. And what worries me a little bit, if I think of, all the announcements which were made over the last weeks, some of them were, from my perspective, of symbolic nature. Just get a few famous names involved and you create the appearance, the startups have been considered in large-scale defense contracts. Mm-hmm. But to which extent? In which role? What kind of maturity? So here I think we have a way to go. And if we make a step back, if we think of the big picture, I mean, we talked already about the fragmented situation here in Europe. And we made a few references to the space program. And space program, you have something what's called geo-return. The function there was, to assure that, the money which came from a certain country will end up again in the same country, so that industry will be fostered there. But if you think of our main title here, it's about deterrence and defense. Deterrence and defense, they don't care about geo-return. We need to think of what is our primary function here. We need to optimize, which we need to maximize, and everything follows. Because without security, anything else is nothing. Yeah, and we need to keep that in mind if we think of larger policies, changes to that. Yeah? And we're talking about changes. I mean, the situation that we are that fragmented today is not new. I was in the military from 2000 to 2012, and we were dealing with the same situation. Yeah, it was already fragmented, But taking the decision to cut jobs in one country and to save some jobs in another country, and vice versa, takes guts, and it's a hard sell, especially if you have elections in front of you. Yeah, but we're still in a situation, and we discussed, the thing, finding the right balance between concentration, the need to create the foundation to scale a company, versus the fact that we need to have still enough room for competition for the innovative basis. And I think we need to find a new balance. And my major concern here is sometimes, in order to change on an organizational, cultural level, it requires an external shock. And what could it be? I don't want to draw the devil on the wall, but we know what happened in Ukraine, and they had no choice. They were required to innovate dramatically, and I don't want to find ours in a similar situation, but now we still have time to fix things, and we should take advantage of the time which is still left.
I have a follow-up question, even though it's not basically, it's related to something you said before. You said, but we also need to think about SMEs who can be suppliers for perhaps more traditional technologies. So I'm a bit, I'm not a military expert either, but I was just with this discussion, I'm wondering, can you really do everything with completely new technologies? I don't know. But but what's your take here? Thomas was worried about big military companies basically building entire supply chains. Does that have to be a problem? Is that then a problem of concentration competition, or do you need a balance between two completely new technologies and also the traditional ones and building some supply chains there? What's your take?
I think we still need big companies because they have a lot of experience when it comes to managing large-scale projects. Yeah, they have the capacities, experience, and I think if you ask the militaries, they are not sure. If you think of Navy systems, in which direction they want to go, they need to go. Yeah, they need to figure it out first. Yeah, but for sure it will be a kind of balanced approach. So we will have large frigates whatsoever combined with autonomous systems, etc. We see the same thing in the air. We see similar things taking place on ground. So that could be one direction. But if we think of the supply chain, of course we should also ask ourselves, okay, if we take these decisions, do we have the means to source everything what is needed to build it? Because this deterrence thing on the supply chain level will only work if we can make our adversary believe that we have everything in place, that we have secured our supply chains. And if you think of what is needed, to build infrared sensors, what is needed to build semiconductors, to have a platform for AI, well, but it's not under our control.
Yeah, but Thomas, you wanted to say something, but I'm just thinking about our general work on supply chains and resilience, which is not only about defense, deterrence, etc., but it's still a fact for nearly everybody, right? That you cannot control the entire supply chains. They're so global, right? So what's the right way to think about it? And perhaps also innovative, procurement for innovation has been a headache for longest time, also outside the defense area. How should we think about these issues?
No, I think there's obviously a very good question, right? But on the global or European also value chains, right, which is also an important aspect. I think in defense contracts, at least in some countries, you have quite a lot of clauses or additional offsets, as we're called. So you award the contract to a company, but there's some conditions on investment in your country or collaborating with your suppliers, or and there are, I mean, I think there's or gradual kind of moving of the production to that country, right? That there's plenty of examples of that. So it's not like, even if you're awarding taxpayers' money to a company that is not your home company, you still might be, through the European value chain, reaping quite a lot of benefits of that spending. And I think that's an aspect that may be underestimated in some of these very politicized discussions of national champions. And so they are actually quite complicated contracts, right? On I think what you're talking about, all these, there's many industries that are quite advanced in some of these issues, right? I mean, I think like the pharmaceutical industry, there's a lot of double sourcing. So you have, an alternative supplier as part of your good manufacturing practice. So you have your first primary supplier, you may have a secondary supplier, which may be more expensive, but it's the go-to supplier in case the first supplier fails, right? The problem is some of these essential inputs, the two suppliers might be sourcing from one original supplier. Some, and when you go down to the very, very basic things like chips or critical minerals, there may be very few suppliers in the world from which we will be sourcing these things. So there are these kind of security risks that have to be taken into account, and obviously diversification, resilience is important, but it may be very difficult to do in practice in some cases. I think the other thing that came up, learning from other industries, I think on capacity procurement, right? I think in the energy sector, you actually have quite a lot of capacity procurement. So there's lessons there that can be definitely drawn. I think the point you raised on universities, I think that was a crucial point that I think I was trying also to make, but I totally agree with you. I mean, this is again, the benefits from the R&D spending in the US, and many people would argue, are because of the whole universe ecosystem, universities, private sector, government agencies, right? And the whole interaction there that has been established for many years that isn't automatic to build up, And there maybe I think also the European aspect is a bit easier to go for, because, the German supplier of military equipment can work with, the French universities, with I think that there maybe it's a bit easier and politically easier to have, more kind of European aspect of that. And finally, I think the point on Nicola, actually, let's not forget that actually military spending or defense spending, a big chunk of that isn't R&D, isn't high technologies, isn't even ammunition and things like that. It's a big chunk of it is personnel, right? I mean, in some OECD countries and some European countries, over half of the military spending is spent on personnel. So, I mean, when we're talking about new technologies and things, the piece of that cake that we see, yes, exactly. And even pensions, I think, of former personnel, right? So when we have these big numbers, I mean, going down to what is actually spent on technology and on innovative technology is actually a much smaller piece of the cake than the big numbers that we're looking at. So just
Probably is. Tommaso, I saw you, but I have a question for Johannes first. He was also raising his finger, I think, about the personnel. And I think that's a completely valid point. But even there, you often make in your work this point of modern warfare, etc. And if I think about one OECD member, Israel, I think they also, of course, they spend a lot on personnel, but even there they train engineers. The engineers work with the startup ecosystem to develop new technologies, etc. Is there something to be learned there, and how could it be, in your mind, implemented at a European level?
So I guess Israel is a special case in terms of mindset and perceived threat for many decades. So we have to be careful how we compare this. But I think Israel really shows that public procurement in this high-tech area can create these clusters of innovation, and there's spillovers. I think it was mentioned before, there's spillovers of technology, but also spillover of people, of minds, that we have well-trained people that go to the Army's engineers group and turn out to 10 years later be the CTOs of some tech unicorn working on a completely different not even dual use, but some other technology, but because they just have well-trained people who like to innovate and create, and they learn to do this in the military, and then they go to the civil sector. So there's something to learn definitely in this aspect, that you want to procure this high tech for all the kinds of spillovers, and you shouldn't underestimate how creating these clusters, how much this can give you in return. And we see it, I guess Munich is maybe an idea of how this could look like, right? We have the university, was mentioned, the universities already, the role of the universities. We have these startups, and there's an ecosystem building up at the moment. We will see where this will go, and I think the Cyber Innovation Hub also has some institution there, so there is something growing at the moment, and this could be a role model if we do it right. But there's many aspects to this, so I wouldn't overstretch the comparison here. So there's a big disclaimer on that one.
Okay, Tommaso, I still have you in my mind, but I have my first question from the audience, and please wait before you get your mic, because I need to revive my audience. So very happy. Please present yourself.
Thank you for the lively discussion. My name is Andreas Knoll. I'm a lawyer with Luther Law Firm, and I'm heading our Kiev office. My question is concerning the subject of universities and civil clause, Zivilklausel, which interdicts basically research in military affairs or military subjects. And I would like to ask the podium, what measures do you envisage to scrap the civil clause as soon as possible?
Do you want to answer, or who would like to? So the question was, what would lead to scrapping this clause? Well, it's a political question, so I don't know whether anybody. Charlotte, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I might be able to explain. I mean, this is the selbstverwaltete Universität, and they are deciding on that on their own. I mean,
so it's not a law.
It's not basically that they. It's not a law. And in the national defense industry strategy, I think we have written down that that the federal government would very much support abolishing these self-implemented rules, but it's very much a question that the universities have to discuss on their own.
Yeah, Eva, maybe you can create a parallel ecosystem, or I don't know, how do you look at that? Because you do a lot of dual use, obviously, and so does Christian's institution.
But maybe to put the civil clause into perspective, the R&D that is right now happening is usually also applicable in the civil space. So the AI, sensor technology, everything which is deep tech, new technology, there is just a few R&D topics that fall fully under the defense scope. So what I want to say is, in the R&D phase, usually the researchers don't care yet about the business case. They are researchers, right? So I think the civil clause is not that problematic in the practical world. But what is more difficult is when the research teams want to leave university to start an own company. Then they have to have a business case, and they want to have the IP they developed in that company. And that's what we are looking at Sprint, how to easily get the IP out of university. University also have an interest to get compensated, of course. The problem is startups that are founded don't have any money yet, so they are usually bootstrapped, so they can't really pay university for the IP, so that's a struggle we try to fix now. So maybe they get some virtual shares, but these are all very new concepts. That's also the cultural thing I mentioned. The university also have to be open-minded about that. So the R&D and the IP and the research can move and can be transitioned into economic value.
Well, Christian, you probably never have any trouble with the civil clause, right? So is it this but in general, the difficulty to use the very good basic research and transform it, get it into successful startups. What's your look at that? As you mentioned before that the innovation cycles are much faster. How could that be pushed a little bit in Germany and Europe?
Yeah, maybe coming back to what Eva just described here. I mean, that is generally true for any deep tech startup, you know. Also, if you spin off from a research institute, you have to deal with the same questions. So this is, again, not something exclusively, owned by the defense-willing founders teams here. This is something what we need to solve in general for the entire tech or founders scene here. At the end of the day, it depends all on the people. If you adjust the law or if you adjust, the framework, but if you have to deal with the wrong people with the wrong mindset, it won't move the needle here. So we need to go to these places where we have, the right spirit. Where we have no issues working on such technologies. There are many universities out there, many research institutes, who are more inclined to these topics, and these are our, preferred kind of addresses to work with when it comes to such topics. So I don't see the bigger issue here from my point of view. The bigger issue is, again, on the other side, if it's with the potential buyers of deep tech technologies in general, if you think of corporates, the typical saying here is, okay, nobody was ever fired for, giving a contract to a well-established corporate here. I won't drop names. We're online, but you know what I mean. And there are many good examples out there, whether it was in the best interest of our taxpayers' money, question mark, we all know what I'm talking about here. And this is also true again for defense. It's about our cultural way to deal with risk, and we have to learn as a society that taking risks and failing occasionally is fine. We should not repeat the same mistake too often. Otherwise it will become expensive. At a certain point, not fundable. But if we think of the launcher companies out there, trying to give us sovereign launch capability to give us the chance to launch our own civilian and military satellites from European ground, they have to fail. They will fail several times until they have an operationally working launch capability. And this is priced in, and this is accepted by investors. And companies in the US have shown us the way. If you want to be part of this league, you have to accept that. Otherwise, you have to take a place at the sideline. And this is, from my point of view, if I look at us, as a society, from a cultural point of view, we are not there yet. If I open, the news in the morning, news with 4 big capital letters, it's like, okay, we will love this blame game here. Company failed, a soccer team failed, things like that. And we have a lot of fun with that. But this is not the way to go from my point of view. We need to accept the fact that failing is part of the game here, and the bigger risk is to do nothing, because then we will fail on a grand scale.
Very good. It's a great concluding remark. But Tommaso, you had a point earlier. Do you still want to make it?
We are concluding, and I completely agree. So I think that, and that is a much more general point. So what we see in Europe and in Germany especially is that we lost this willingness to take risk. And we see it. We had a lot of interviews with firms asking whether they adopt AI, and the main, so they talk about regulation and bureaucracy and talent, but at the end is this lack of willingness to take the risk. Maybe it works, maybe it not. We did the things always this way. It will work. And then no, I mean the world has changed. So I completely agree.
The world has changed. I think nobody. I don't see any further. There was a question. Okay. Yeah. Please, we can take one last question.
I don't know if we have time for that. I'm Raffaele Tartaglia Bolcini, financial expert of the Bank of Italy, here at the Italian Embassy. Right. I would like to thank your panelists, and I must confess that after this conversation, I'm a little bit more pessimistic on the topic, but I really thank you for being so clear. My question would be, if I'm not so specific, if you can 2 minutes elaborate on the possible lessons learned of the case of F-126 Fregata, and what could we learn from the point of view of competition at the EU level in defense, and from the point of view of procurement? Thanks.
Tommaso. Anyway,
it's a difficult question. So I mean, I want to be positive. So now is a chance to move on and not do these things anymore. And then maybe connecting. So the point I want to do is ecosystem. So we will not think anymore about just tanks, ammunition, or new technology. So the future is defense systems, and there is where I think it's more complicated. So we will have ecosystem, and then from the competition point of view, the question is the ecosystem Rheinmetall owning everything? Or is the ecosystem so open so that we have many players that through interoperability, through the possibility to be part of the chain will also increase innovation and competition. And I think we should go into that direction. And my fear is that we are moving more in the direction, Rheinmetall will do everything. If you read it from this point of view, I think maybe the moving away from we do the huge ship is a good movement, and maybe it's a bit lesson learned. Let's see.
Johannes has a point to make. Fine.
I just wanted to add, if you want to build stuff, you need to be sure that you have enough capacity to build this stuff. And the shipyards are booked for decades. If you look at the order books for the big companies that build ships, I will not name any names, but Tommaso likely knows them all. You have to put the right incentives there again. So they are the CEOs. They are happy with their full books for decades to come, and they have contracts for the next decades. But nobody is incentivizing them to build new facilities. The US is doing this differently. They pay for the construction of shipyards because they say we might need to have a lot of ships. This is the better approach. Rather than building one ship, you build 3 shipyards, and if you need many ships, you can build them faster and cheaper in the future. So that would be, I wouldn't draw a lesson on whether we need this technology or another technology, but rather how we approach this. And just giving out these contracts to pile up in some company is not the right way.
Well, that's another good concluding remark. Well, it's not concluding because luckily DIW has prepared a light lunch for all of you, and then you can continue discussing these complex, important and interesting issues. I thank my wonderful panel and Johannes for stimulating us, and I wish you a good informal part of the event. Thank you.